Okay, let's dive right into it. Today, we're tackling the massive collision between the skyrocketing hype of artificial intelligence and the squishy biological reality of our own brains. I mean, we constantly hear these bold claims about cognitive enhancement and brain optimization, all fueled by AI breakthroughs. But how much of that is actually real? In this explainer, we are going to act as investigative partners. We're unpacking rigorous evidence from neuroscience and complexity science to figure out what's really happening inside our heads versus what's just happening in massive server farms.
It's the billion-dollar question everyone seems to be asking right now, isn't it? If we can just plug more servers in to scale up a machine, why can't we biohack our own neural networks to achieve superhuman intelligence? Well, let's separate the actual science from the science fiction.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, the AI emergence hype. Second, emergence in the brain. Third, the limits of brain training. Fourth, hard biological cognitive limits. And finally, separating fact from fiction. All right, part one, the AI emergence hype. Let's decode the machine, because to understand brain upgrades, we really have to look at digital brains first. A lot of the sheer excitement around AI right now comes down to this one fascinating concept, emergence. It's this wild idea that simply scaling up a system suddenly unlocks entirely new abilities. As AI models get larger, they don't just get, marginally better at doing the exact same tasks. They abruptly develop brand new capabilities that smaller models just don't have. A landmark paper by Wei and colleagues documented this phenomenon beautifully. Think of it like piling up sand. For a while, you're just making a pile, but then suddenly you don't just have a pile anymore. You have a full-blown avalanche. This sudden leap in ability is exactly what is the cognitive enhancement world so incredibly hyped up. So how does this avalanche actually happen? Well, it happens through very predictable scaling laws. You feed an artificial system more compute, more data, and more parameters, and its performance literally improves as a power law. Researchers like Kaplan and others proved that if you just feed the machine more juice, it gets smarter. At a certain threshold, a network might actually stop stubbornly memorizing the data and suddenly grok, or truly understand the underlying rules. It exhibits genuine generalization. The logic is simple and intoxicating. More input fundamentally equals new intelligence.
Moving right along to part two, emergence in the brain, the science of self. Because, to be totally fair to the optimists out there, the human brain is the original emergent system. Think about it. Human self-awareness isn't just sitting there located in one magical spot in your head. It is a highly networked, constructed property that emerges from areas like the temporal parietal junction, seamlessly integrating all of our senses. A really classic, almost creepy demonstration of this is the famous rubber hand illusion by Botvinnik and Cohen. Picture this. If a researcher strokes your hidden real hand and a visible fake rubber hand in perfect synchrony, your brain essentially adopts the rubber hand. Your very sense of body ownership physically emerges from multi-sensory integration. Your brain is highly dynamic, constructing reality right on the fly.
And this brings us to neuroplasticity. Studies of adults learning to juggle show actual, visible physical changes to both gray and white matter in the brain. Researchers like Dragansky and Schultz completely proved that when adults learn a complex new skill, their brains structurally rewire themselves. This is neuroplasticity in action. We are not static machines. Our hardware literally morphs to match our software, our experiences. Which brings us to part three, the limits of brain training, hitting the ceiling. We know for a fact we have plastic brains, but can we just continuously biohack them into superintelligence? Look, we've all seen the ads, right? Endless claims about unlocking your limitless potential. And while established science, like Erickson's foundational 1993 work, proves deliberate practice is absolutely vital for expert performance, the cultural takeaway has been massively distorted. Erickson tells us that to get incredibly good at something, you have to practice it deliberately and consistently. But somewhere along the line, pop culture completely hijacked this solid science and warped it into a guarantee of infinite cognitive potential. Take the famous 10,000-hour rule, for instance. It is a massive oversimplification. Research actually shows that working memory training produces extremely limited FAR transfer to general intelligence. This is a pretty huge blow to the whole brain training app industry. A major meta-analysis by Melby, Lervag, and Holm looked into this. They found that if you train really hard at a specific memory game, well, you're going to get exceptionally good at that exact memory game. That's called near transfer. But does it make you better at math? Does it fundamentally boost your overall IQ? Nope. That FAR transfer is extremely limited. You literally cannot just play a memory app for 10,000 hours and wake up as a super genius. And this side-by-side comparison reveals the fundamental disconnect we're dealing with.
AI scaling laws really just require more electricity and more microchips, allowing those servers to theoretically scale infinitely. But our biology? As researcher Takawa Hench has detailed, our developing brains go through strict critical periods, and once those developmental windows slam shut in adulthood, our plasticity is permanently constrained by the actual physical borders of our skull. We don't have an endless biological hard drive where we can just plug in more memory sticks.
Let's look closer at that in Part 4, Hard Biological Cognitive Limits, the evolutionary bottleneck. This brings us right to the uncompromising physical realities of the human machine. Get this. Despite making up only about 2% of your total body mass, your brain hogs a staggering 20% of your resting metabolic energy. To put that into perspective, your brain runs on about 20 watts of power. That is barely enough to power a dim refrigerator light bulb. Yet, evolutionarily speaking, it's a massive, expensive drain on your body. Evolutionary researchers Isler and Van Schaik noted that brain size evolution carries these massive metabolic costs. Yes, your brain is a brilliant supercomputer, but it is an unbelievably expensive one to run, and your body only has so much daily fuel to go around. These evolutionary constraints are absolutely crucial to understand. Maintaining our neural network is extraordinarily expensive, and that places a hard physical cap on how much cognitive capacity we can naturally support. You can't just infinitely increase synaptic density. I mean, there is literal physical space inside your skull to consider. Plus, the energy required to fire all those extra theoretical synapses would basically starve the rest of your body. Our intelligence is perfectly balanced on a metabolic knife edge.
Furthermore, optimal learning physically requires offline consolidation through sleep. This proves we cannot simply upload data to our brains continuously without resting. It's a fascinating constraint, really. Studies by Walker, Deichelman, and Bourne prove that to actually learn a complex motor skill or consolidate a memory, your brain absolutely has to shut down external input and process the data offline. Synaptic consolidation happens while you're sleeping. An AI model can train 24/7. We simply cannot.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Separating Fact from Fiction, the final verdict. Let's definitively separate the established signal from the unsupported noise.
When we lay out the rigorous data like we have in this table, the verdict becomes incredibly clear. Does the brain exhibit emergent properties? Yes, absolutely. Do we see parallels between AI and our own visual cortex? Yes, some moderate ones. But the idea of achieving superintelligence level biological cognition, there is absolutely zero scientific backing for that. None. The empirical evidence for somehow expanding our consciousness into godlike tiers simply does not exist right now. And to be completely thorough, we also have to neutrally acknowledge the ongoing scientific contradictions in the AI space itself. For example, there's a huge debate over whether sudden AI capability jumps are real, magical phase transitions, or just measurement illusions. A recent paper by Schaefer and colleagues shook everything up. They argued that maybe AI emergence isn't a sudden awakening at all. They proposed that if you use continuous, smooth metrics instead of rigid pass or fail tests, those sudden jumps in AI ability actually look like gradual, predictable improvements. Basically, are we just using the wrong ruler? This tells us we need to be incredibly careful before mapping AI magic onto our own biological expectations. So instead of chasing unverified brain enhancement apps, the genuine path forward lies in understanding real mechanisms. This is where the real scientific frontier is. We should be deeply investigating how to keep our neuroplasticity healthy as we age. We should be exploring how the brain uses predictive processing to anticipate the world. And we should be figuring out how human and digital systems can ethically work together as a hybrid team, playing to the unique strengths of each. So, I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder long after this explainer ends. Perhaps our evolutionary constraints aren't a bug that needs to be hacked, but a perfectly balanced feature just waiting to be fully understood. The science shows us that our brains are remarkable, emergent, neuroplastic engines, elegantly bound by the metabolic realities of being human. Learning to operate optimally right inside those boundaries, with good sleep, deliberate practice, and rigorous focus, well, that is far more scientifically grounded than waiting around for an imaginary cognitive software patch. Thanks so much for diving into the data with me today.